Hello? Where do you think the word came from? It's an
E and
expression.
Fa.
Yes,
Wow.
it's a symbol of the resonant frequencies that creates everything.
Wow. Wow. E, Fa. Like boom. And so that is why when we talk about the drum, we talk about all these different things that are a part of it. This is really based in about sound.
Yes, and
Resonant.
here's the real miracle. All right, the Eureki that were used to put you in possession during your initiation was passed to you from your elders, and it was passed to them by their elders. The words in those Eurekis create an automatic link with the correct frequency. It's called Ofo Ashe. You're a musician. If I say I want you to sing every pitch between middle C and C above middle C and break it up into 256 different frequencies, you wouldn't be able to do it. I don't think there's any human alive that'd be able to do it. But you are able to do it when you say the Ofo Ashe or the words of power in the Reiki, because your brain locks in automatically to those frequencies, which is how how we're able to access Ashe and pass it from one generation to another. That's why the traditions are so important, and that's why it's really shameful that instead of spending time with our elders to gain access to that wisdom, we're just making stuff up.
So you have a person real quick. Divination is haram in Islam. Why do you think that is?
Well, divination, haram. I said in Islam. Okay, so divination, as it's practiced in Ifa, is based on divination as it was practiced in ancient Egypt, and the text, instead of being Odu Ifa, was the emerald tablets. All right, so in Egypt they referred to divination as sand cutting. When the Muslims came into Egypt, they took over that system and they replaced the text of the Book of the Dead with the Quran, which is normal, I think, and also in the Bible, the Ifa divination is called casting of lots. In the Bible, in the ancient times, in Jewish culture, you had a handful of sticks. You grab some. If you had one stick, you marked 2 marks in the sand. If you grabbed one stick, 2 sticks, you mark 1 mark in the sand. Sand cutting, absolutely exactly the same thing as Odu Ifa, except the verses for sand cutting in Hebrew tradition are based on the Torah. And the Torah is a coded reference to the frequencies used in alchemy, and the stories are just a way of holding those secret doctrines.
Right, and that's where I was like kind of getting into like that. The Torah was at one point a thing used for priests to do, but it's okay. But all right, so I'm not gonna hold you too much longer. It's
That's
almost
all
been
right. I'm good for another few minutes. Keep going.
okay because I remember I was saying that I believe that the Torah, was equivalent to E5 at one point, a oral tradition that the Levitical priests used, and that it was a certain thing that wasn't even done to even get those laws out. That when you would go to the Levitical priest, this is how things were done. But as time went on, those things became like a book. People read the Torah.
Yeah, listen. The history is a little more clear, but it's definitely suppressed. All right, so let's talk about the history for a minute. Those ideas were developed in ancient Egypt. When Alexander the Great, in quotes, took over Egypt and made himself the pharaoh, the esoteric wisdom of Egypt went into hiding. It went into the mountains along the Hamagadi, it's called, and they were coded into books about Christ consciousness that then migrated into Ethiopia and became the foundation for the Ethiopian Bible. So those are all ancient coded Egyptian texts. What we call the Gospels, there's 4 Gospels, but in the Hagmagadi books on Christ consciousness, there's 84 Gospels. So 80 Gospels have been suppressed and declared a heresy because they give people power to transform their own physical reality, is my point. So the point is that when the sand cutting of the divination system of Egypt was forced into hiding by Alexander the Great. It moved through Judaism to Jerusalem, and the texts that described it, the books, the first time it was written down probably, were hidden under Solomon's temple. And after being written down by a group of Egyptian priests living in Jerusalem called the Essenes. All right. So the Essenes, when Rome defeated Israel at the beginning of the Common Era and at the time of the crucifixion, there was a Jewish diaspora where the rabbis moved to a country called Septimania, which you've never heard of, but Septimania is in southern France, and there the rabbis met with the Cistercian Catholic priest under Saint Bernard, and they formed a thing called the Knights Templars. The Knights Templar was led by a man named Hugo Païens. In French, Hugo Païens means Hugo the Pagan, which is a way in those days of calling a person African. Hugo Païens was a Moor. Moor is academic code for African from North Africa. Hugo Païens was selected to head the Knights Templars to go to Jerusalem to retrieve all those documents. And he was chosen because he spoke a half a dozen different languages and was able to negotiate his way to get access to that. He got access to those documents. He brought them back to Europe. They became part of what is known in Western academia as the Invisible College, in which great ancient African wisdom was really studied by the intellectuals, but kept from the masses, so to speak. But one of the first things that group did was they realized that English language was inadequate to translate the emerald tablets and the scrolls that were taken from Jerusalem. So those first scholars of African philosophy formed a group to write a series of plays that introduced 3,000 new words to the English language. Those plays were attributed to a man named Shakespeare, who never really existed. It was a collective effort to add scientific concepts to the English language. And
wait, Shakespeare never existed?
No, he was an actor, but he couldn't read or write. He certainly didn't write any of the plays.
What?
And how do I know that? Those plays were written by, God, this sounds so pretentious. Those plays were written by an ancient cousin of mine named Nicholas de Vries. So the point is that those scrolls were guarded by a group called the Priory of Zion. And the Priory of Zion over the years has periodically released some of that information. And 100 years ago, the Priory of Zion was run by my ancestors, and that's how I know all this. So they know I know, they know I know, they know I know. They're not all happy that I'm talking about it, but that doesn't mean it's not true. And it certainly shows a connection between ancient Egypt, ancient Hebrew traditions, ancient African traditions, and ancient Islamic traditions to a certain extent, yes.
So how many people that are in power practice Ifa quiet?
Well, they don't call it that, but they actually refer to it as Satanism, but it's based on the suppression of similar ideas. And, you know, here's the thing. Okay, so the most recent head of the Satanic Church supposedly died in a New York jail after setting up brothels in New Mexico and in the Caribbean. All right, so if you want to know what all that scandal is about, it's got a little bit to do with raping children, but it's got a lot to do with using ritual to control the world based on ancient African ideas that they do not want you to understand or know. I am not saying that ancient African ideas are evil. I'm saying there are people in the world who control global resources who know how to use those ancient African ideas in an evil way. And we need to reclaim them and use them in a positive way, as was their original intention.
Right. And so, what do you think the importance of learning divination for why do you think it's important for everyone to learn how to divine um, versus because I
Yeah,
believe
yeah, listen, here's the value of divination. Every Odu that comes to define a problem is solved by the opposite Odu. Every one. And the opposite does not mean upside down. So, for example, what's the opposite of Ogun? You know?
no, I don't
It's
know
not.
the opposite
It's
of
not.
Ogun.
Okay, sorry. It's not Osai. It's Obara. All right. So in other words, every single line in an Odu, if you make it a double line, every double line in Odu, you make a single line. That new Odu that you create by that process is the solution to the problem. And the reason it's the solution to the problem is it creates stasis. Stasis is the frequency of EJ Ogbe in which there's perfect balance between the points of the Merkaba and the sphere, the torsion sphere that holds the Merkaba. And in that perfect balance comes access to the power of creation to transform physical reality.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens when you get to be my age, if a problem arises in the street, you immediately can see the Odu that's coming manifest, and you immediately know the solution. I was walking with my Baba down the street one day in Ode Ramo, and we came to a bridge we needed to cross, and there was a dog standing at the entrance to the bridge, barking and snarling and looking vicious. The Arabah didn't even break stride. He bent down, he picked up a handful of dirt, he marked an Odu in the dirt, he blew the dirt in the dog's face, the dog rolled over and took a nap. In other words,
the dog took a nap, but he put the Odu in his hand and the dog and blew it in the dog's face and took a nap.
Yes, and so the point is that if you're able to see the world as problem and solution manifesting simultaneously, that eliminates all stress, and you're able to lead a life of what's called inner peace or suru. And inner peace is the whole point of Iwa Pele, and Odu Ifa is the instruction manual on how to access inner peace.